The Cornetto Trilogy encompasses 3 films by Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, written between 2004 and 2013. The writers' distinctive voices and humour are present throughout the anthology series, and throughout the trilogy they explore 3 major themes: pastiche, friendship, and the British experience. This series has had a major impact on me as a writer and my style of writing, and throughout this video essay I will reflect on their influences on my own work. Watching the 3 films and with further reading, it became apparent that whilst each film contains aspects of the 3 major themes, they individually favour one over the other. 3 different flavours of cornetto, you might say. I think this is reflective of how each genre lends itself structurally to each theme. The trope of getting the band back together is right for exploring friendship, whereas the big cop small town plot of Hot Fuzz expands upon the Britishness of the small town itself. With this in mind, as I explore and relate each of the 3 films, I'll be focusing on one specific theme for each. All 3 themes are present in all 3 films, but these observations will reflect the specific inspirations that I've taken from each piece. Like the writers, I am also fascinated by the British stiff upper lip and the comedic value that can be wrung out of our island, and building on what came before. They scripted the frustrations of modernity and the simmering conformist attitude of working class Britain. As the trilogy progresses, the 3 leads become more anti-conformist, and their character motivations shift from laziness and ignorance to raging against the machine. In the first instalment, Sean finds comfort in the conformity of his humdrum lifestyle, but the following protagonist, Nicholas Angel, is restrained by the keeping up appearances world that surrounds him. By the time we reach Gary King, the final protagonist, he's positively repulsed by the idea of getting a job and settling down. Though an anthology series set in 3 distinctively different worlds, the 3 leads explore the irony of their systems, but their own attitudes towards it. Sean enjoys the blissful ignorance of the life early noughties, but relishes in becoming an action hero by the finale. Nicholas Angel is restrained and confined by countryside life in Sanford, and yet has a totalitarian, no-nonsense attitude towards police procedures. And Gary King mocks his friends for growing up and their buttoned-down lifestyles, but is a perpetual child himself and can't move on from the past. This ebb and flow relationship with conformity is present in my work as well. The 9-to-5 system our culture is built on provides a wealth of comedic potential, and whilst I don't want to glorify it or play into easy visual gags, I'm also not a radical. Your audience will be bringing their own experiences and perspective to your story, and the Cornetto Trilogy exceeds in providing it for both. They can be surface-level genre busters, if that's what you want them to be, or satirical pieces for the open-minded. Though I've seen other films and artists that played with pastiche and parody, such as in Blazing Saddles or Scary Movie, in my opinion, none have done it with such subtle flair than Wright and Pegg. They taught us how we can pay loving homage to a genre, whilst doing something completely new with it, and not simply remaking it. There's magic to be found in showing the audience a thing that they love, complete with all the trimmings and tropes, settings and genres, and then introducing something completely new to it. Complex emotional themes, such as the ones I've mentioned, they can be explored under the guise of traditional genre films. Wright and Pegg found a way to explore bromance and conformity in a zombie apocalypse story, and small-town corruption with a helping of British idealism in a police academy setting. For me, the final entry to the trilogy explores the most weighted themes yet: nostalgia and addiction. It was at this point in their careers that audiences had caught onto the idea that these films weren't just films, and a writer with such clinical precision as Wright was wary of this. When he was promoting The World's End in 2013, it allowed him to reflect on the trilogy on the whole, where he finally addressed, well, they're all set in contemporary UK, and they're all Trojan horses. They're genre films that have a relationship comedy smuggled inside a zombie movie, a cop movie, and a sci-fi movie. The very title of the Cornetto Trilogy summarises my love for this franchise. Cornettos were a side gag in Shaun, and Wright added a reference in Hot Fuzz simply as a nod to the first film. However, fan theorists went wild and questioned the writers if the series intentionally lampooned the Three Colours trilogy by, I'm going to get this wrong, Krzysztof Kieslowski. In that series, the 3 colours represented the 3 colours of the French flag and the ideals of French culture, but in the Cornetto Trilogy, they represent the 3 comedic aspects of the trilogy: red for the blood in Shaun of the Dead, blue for the police in Hot Fuzz, and a green, fictional flavour for the aliens in World's End. Wright is an observant scriptwriter, as evidenced in his other work, and he uses setups and payoffs to tell small narrative stories as part of a bigger picture and establish a meta-narrative. This trilogy's heavy use of foreshadowing especially has had a great impact on my storytelling, as I'm fascinated with planting seeds in my script, which can be minor plots or hints at revelations to come. Shaun of the Dead was our introduction into the writer's world, and from the offset, the title introduces the audience to this world of subverted genres. Here is a rom-com wrapped in a zombie survival movie, and the film fully explores the British experience. The film is of its time, and during the famous double-take scene where Shaun goes to the shops, the modernity and conformity of his routine is fully laid bare. The protagonist embodies Britain in the early noughties, lost, oblivious to the world outside, and scared of doing anything outside his routine. Prior to the zombie apocalypse, Shaun will default to the pub, and even in the face of life-threatening danger, he still defaults to the comfort of conformity.
Take car, go to Mum's, kill Phil, grab Liz, go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and wait for all this to blow over.
There's a lot of comedic potential in having the character fixate on modernity at exactly the wrong time, but it provides us with an excellent insight into Shaun's character and constantly sets levels for his character development. Many times in my scripts, my characters will agree on a go to the Winchester way of thinking, but when the action heightens, there will be key moments where their views differ and they berate each other for fixating on trivial issues. Though Pegg and Wright turned the zombie genre on its head in Shaun, they didn't lean into the tropes of the genre on the same level as Zombieland would a few years later. It was in the next film, Hot Fuzz, where they fully realised the potential for Pastiche, and it's this instalment which feels the most genre to me. The opening sequence could sit alongside the opening montages of most Hollywood blockbusters. The main setting of Sanford is a postcard community up there with Heartbeat and Emmerdale. Pastiche and Parody have difficult lines to tread when factoring in copyright and intellectual property laws, but the world of freelance scriptwriting allows you to brush closely with these borders without these risks. Hot Fuzz landed the trick of not directly parodying a specific film, but instead accumulating tropes and semiotics from several different films. Anyone could take the script of Star Wars, change the names, and then claim it's a parody, but the work that Wright and Pegg put in requires a deeper understanding and appreciation of the source material. In my writing, I found that the aim is for the audience to recognise the tropes without the story or characters spoon-feeding it to them. For example, the clichés used in Hot Fuzz, Fish Out of Water, Police Academy, and Big Trouble in a Small Town, aren't used as story crutches, but rather necessary beats within the genre. They demonstrate the writer's love and celebration for the genre and all its tropes. And the beauty of a pastiche film such as this and others is that the writers can intentionally use as many clichés as they wish, as that's the entire point. Pop culture enthusiast Steven Seagal observed that sometimes parody of pastiche shows a deeper love for the original source material than 100 official sequels ever could. In 40 years, has there ever really been a better Star Trek movie than Galaxy Quest, or a better Fantastic Four movie than The Incredibles? Throughout the trilogy, the same actors reprised different roles, yet it was Hot Fuzz which explored a meta-narrative of named British actors essentially playing themselves. Actors such as David Bradley and Jim Broadbent play exaggerated versions of archetypes that they've built over their careers. Although casting isn't a script concern, I've adapted this approach into my own work by using archetypes and stock characters as shorthand for scene settings. For me, these characters provide a deep well of jokes to pull from, as well as quickly establishing a dynamic for the scene to play out from. If you see a traditional policeman with a twiddly moustache and a bucket hat, you know what he's going to say. In the years that followed, the writers pursued other projects, and could only justify completing the trilogy if the right story presented itself. For me, The World's End is a perfect finale to the trilogy, and perfectly summarised the strongest theme of the trilogy: friendship. The bond between Pegg and Frost's characters is the most present throughout the first two films, including this one, but World's End explores the complex relationships between old school friends and how nostalgia taints our memories. The protagonist in this film, Gary King, is addicted to nostalgia, and this is the inciting incident which drives the getting the band back together cliché that drives the first act of the story. As the name suggests, World's End presents itself firstly as an apocalypse movie, to the extent of directly parodying threads in its epilogue, but its sci-fi elements explore at least 3 different alien invasion genres. The second act explores the genre of They Live Among Us, borrowing beats from They Live and The Thing, but transitions into a survival story on the scope of Independence Day and War of the Worlds by the time we hit Act 3. Yet throughout this is the growing development of the film's largest themes, toxic nostalgia and addiction. Gary shares the same stubborn desire to continue the pub crawl as Sean did 2 films earlier, and the friendship between the characters has expanded to a full group, but these two factors are tested to their limits when the crawl becomes life-saving. On a meta level, the first 2 films of the trilogy portray not only the British experience, but the experience as imagined by its characters. This is evidenced through Sean's blissful ignorance, the Sanford Police's nefarious desire to keep up appearances, and the aliens' desire to encapsulate the perfect human lifestyle in world. All 3 play into the experience that we know, but heighten it as the series goes along, becoming inwardly aware that even its characters and antagonists are creating the reality the films exist in. Other comedies such as This Country and Royal Family, they accurately portray life in contemporary Britain, but in a format that's diegetic and organic. In these comedies, the world isn't laid out for us with heavy exposition because it's our world. There's no gimmick to explain, there's no twist to explore. Now, this type of comedy, whilst extremely challenging to write, is not the approach I've taken to my writing. Like Right and Peg, I take aspects and semiotics of a world the audience are familiar with, but play around with real-world characters and settings in the same way we do with genre bending. This plays into the wider narrative of making films that lead into the format of filmmaking, and explore their own mediums, where this could be restricted in a radio or stage play. In The Anatomy of Story, 22 Steps to Becoming a Master Storyteller, John Truby writes, "The story world isn't a copy of life as it is. It's life as human beings imagine it could be. It is human life condensed and heightened so that the audience can gain a better understanding of how life itself works." I think there's a lot of potential and excitement in cherry-picking aspects of media and real-life familiarity and throwing them together. The method of scriptwriting that Wright and Pegg have specialised in has introduced us to the idea of pastiche as a gateway to exploring wider themes and telling bigger stories that the genre would never normally allow. Likewise, the combination of their teachings and my research has allowed me to see beyond the immediate potential of genre storytelling and take on bigger subjects and themes.